Good afternoon. Good afternoon to my friends, colleagues, ex-colleagues, and co-professionals in this beautiful industry of ours, the aviation. First of all, let me introduce my friends that today have accepted my invitation to be part of this Air Convention discussion on the impact of COVID-19 on the aviation industry. We have Alan Borg, the Chief Executive Officer of Malta Airport. We have Eero Pragme from Tallinn Airport, is its Chief Commercial Officer. We have Javier Gandara, the Country Director for EasyJet for Portugal, Spain and Netherlands. We have Andrea Giuricin from the University Bicocca of Milan. He's also the CEO of TRA Consulting and visiting professor of probably 3/4 of the world university, super expert on the transport and regulations. We have Jaap Hoekstra, the CEO of Kilpatrick Aviation, a niche consultancy, a very interesting organization that I will probably introduce a bit more in depth later on. This is probably the 150 or 200 webinar on the crisis in aviation industry. I just want to make this very interactive, first because we are friends before being co-workers and colleagues. So let's imagine to be in a bar with plenty of alcohol to forget these hard times. But in any case, also maintain a certain professional standard. So once upon a time, there was a golden realm full of people happy and working together. That realm was called aviation. Then all of a sudden, 11th of March, World Health Organization has declared a new pandemic in the world, the COVID-19. Now let's focus for a moment on aviation. Aviation industry is said to support $2.7 trillion industry. Basically the 3.6% of the world gross domestic product. In other words, if aviation were a country, aviation would be the 20th country in the world in terms of GDP size. You just think about it. A typical primary hub airport, London Heathrow, Charles de Gaulle, Amsterdam, employs circa 40,000 people each. And that's without counting the induct or the induced kind of workforce. A nice guy, Harvard University professor of economy, Kenneth Rogoff, said, until there is a better sense of when and how the COVID-19 crisis will be resolved, economists cannot even begin to predict the end of the recession. It's a strong statement, it's a worrying statement, but I think very true. And in the meantime, the average family man with people to feed and perhaps, hopefully, a job, won't fly. It won't fly primarily because, to mention another university professor, Fabio Sdogatti of Polytechnic of Milan, this crisis has triggered a negative demand shock, which is when a sudden event decreases demands for goods or services. That was the introduction, a bit on a pessimistic side, but try to be as neutral as I could be. And let's do a step back now. Let's take a look again at that golden realm of aviation. And I'd like for Andrea to show the first 2 or 3 slides that he has prepared on a picture of aviation just before COVID-19.
Thank you, Enzo. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. And I will try to share my presentation because in my presentation there's some elements that I hope that could help to understand where we are before the start of the COVID-19, as Enzo told very well. So this is a little bit the point, and is how to think and how to change very quickly the world. Of course. I'm trying to share my presentation, and of course, the element that I underline is that the company before starting the now can share. Sorry for that. It was quite long, but here we are. Great. I call that Hurricane COVID-19, short and long-term impact on air transport. Of course, we have more slides, but I want to start not with my presentation, but I want to show a little bit some numbers about the last years. And the last years, airlines, if we check on the airlines, we saw that the EBIT margin of the airlines, or the airline before interest and tax margin in 2019 was quite good. There was some exception, for example, Airwings that have some problem also because they were merged together with some assets of Air Berlin, as you know very well. And at the same time, there was some estimation about Alitalia, because Alitalia, you know, that was losing more than €500 million last year. But what we saw in general, that the company have a positive margin from 16% to other company around 5%, like Lufthansa Group, Air France-KLM Group, like 4.2. But many of these airlines have a very positive EBIT margin. So airlines until last year was going quite well. And the other elements that we have to take in consideration, it was a world that more and more was going to the consolidation, to the merger, and also was 5 big groups that were growing in terms of million of passengers, and one was Ryanair, the second was Lufthansa Group, IAG of course was growing also thanks to the merger. We know that also Air Europa was going inside the group. Then we have Air France-KLM and EasyJet. So this is the big 5 right now in the airline industry in Europe, and the market is more and more concentrated. And this element is very, very important because we are concentrated, but not yet at the same level of US, for example. Just an example from this graph. On the left side, you can see the top 5 airlines that have around 50% of the total market, and the EBIT in general, the average for the market in Europe was around 6%. If we go to the US, in the US, the top 5 airlines have around 86%, and the margin is higher. So what we know that more and more we go to the concentration, higher is the margin for the airlines. What we expected, that is quite logical. The other element, of course, there's an element that is coming from, the slot, the grandfather's rights. So what we saw here from a slide, that is quite clear that some companies, some airlines has a good position in many airports. Here is just an example of Lufthansa, but we can take other examples from other airlines, and they have this kind of element that we have to take in consideration. So we saw that the airlines was going quite well. In US, the margin was higher than in Europe. We know about some position of dominance in some hub of some airlines, but at the same time it was a quite competitive market, quite positive in terms of margin market, that from this point we started in 2019, and we arrived in 2020 with an impact of COVID-19 that I think that we can discuss.
We are going to show and focus on those numbers a bit later. I would like to just stop for a moment and ask Aero first and Alan later, just a quick recap of their traffic situation at their airports, and from day to night, just to try to make sense or give us a kind of explanation of what happened, and in the immediate terms, what was the impact on their airports after the closure of the skies. So Aero, if you want to go first.
Thank you, Enzo, and thank you for having this event, of course. It's good to be here. From the Tallinn perspective, in Estonia, our airport was never fully closed. So we maintained operation during the crisis, but as all the other and the airport, then it actually meant that we still lost 98% of our business. So that was April. And at the moment, the June, the flight operations already are on 33% from the previous year, so they're back. But passenger number is still minus. So it's, I think, rather depressing time for all the airlines at the airport, and it's still going on.
Okay, Alan, what about in Malta? Tell me just what happened 5 days after the sky closures.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for having me. And so, basically, we had off to a good start. 2020 was first 2 months of the year were double-digit growth, so we're heading strong towards our 7.5 million passenger target. Government announced restrictions on Italy in early March and announced a full closure for commercial flights on the 21st of March. April for us was 2,300 passengers, which basically equates to 1 hour of traffic in an average summer month. And May was 3,000 passengers, so it was a big blow. I think that the added part for Malta, being the smallest island state in the European Union, is that tourism equates to 30% of our GDP, and therefore not only the airport was affected, but by far and large all the hospitality and tourism related activities were brought to a halt. So it was tough month, March.
Thank you, guys. And which makes me think about the airlines now and EasyJet, my old employer. Javier, you had everything on sale, basically. All the summer season was on sale, trying to probably work with the yields in the end just to maximize them based on the various load factors at certain destinations. And then all of a sudden, boom, everything stopped. It was a nightmare. Can you tell us what happened in the big orange hangar in Luton?
Well, thanks, Enzo, and thanks for having me here. It's really a pleasure. So I guess this is just a proof that Murphy's Law works, because if there would be the worst moment where a crisis like this could happen is when it happened, and it was just at the beginning of the summer season, which, as we all know, is when we make all the profits that compensate for the winter losses. No, so in our case, we started with Italy. With more or less beginning of March, we completely stopped all flying. Then Spain, mid-March, we stopped all flying, and then at the end of March, on the 30th of March, we grounded the complete fleet, and then we are still like this. I mean, we're resuming flights next Monday. So as from the 15th of June, we are starting just flying some mostly domestic routes in the UK and in France, in Italy and other places, very few international. But I guess that's going to be the first part of the recovery, where we will be able to first, return to the activity, because we've been for a few months without any flying at all. But then also we're already just looking into July and August. So in July, we are already just up and ready to deliver more or less what is 30% of our capacity in normal conditions. So it's still low, but it's true that what we did also is try to open up the choice. So then we're going to fly around 50% of all our routes in July, even though with reduced frequency. That's why the 30% capacity. And then for August, we are planning to increase that capacity share a bit, but still not much. And we are planning to get to at least 75% of our routes operated. No, so pretty much it's a slow recovery. The critical point right now for us is really to safely return to the activity, and that includes both, of course, operational safety, but also what is now called biosecurity, and that's really important, with all the different mitigations in place from all the different actors. And that's why, for us, we believe the first important thing is to really make sure that we safely recover the activity, so that the consumers can start getting trust and confidence again to fly and to make all these marvelous things that actually flying and making tourism just allows them to do. So pretty much it's just like a new beginning, but we are ready for it.
Thank you. There is another aspect that is probably not mentioned as much in all these discussions on the aviation industries. It's always there, it's always implied, it's in the background, but it's so dramatic and critical, and it's the people who work in aviation. We have probably a good million of persons now in furlough program all over the world. We have hundreds of thousands made redundant. A good few numbers lucky. Now they're starting to work back, but they work from home. And in that discussion, I would love to be helped by Jap. Jap is the CEO of Kilpatrick Aviation. And I think just during the crisis, they came out with a brilliant idea. I think it's they got in touch with more than 300 aviation organizations and trying to maximize the discussion and focus it on people in aviation. What can we do for them and what do they need to show in these difficult times? Jap is about resilience. It's a magic word. Could you tell us a bit more about this? Thank you.
Absolutely, Enzo. Thank you very much for this phenomenal introduction. Very similar to what happened on the airports and the airlines. We also went from a very high demand to nearly zero demand. So as a company, we either provide HR solutions or we provide the people. And people is always a challenge. And it doesn't really matter, but up till a couple of months ago, there was a shortage of just about everything. It goes from the pilots to maintenance, MRO, anywhere in the industry, there was a lack of good and talented people. So that's our core business. Well, that has, of course, dramatically changed from a high demand in just about everything to almost no demand. Saying almost no demand means that there is still demand. Some of the areas have been very, very little infected. If you think about airport infrastructure, hardly had any impact at all. Airport security systems, but even developing drones, high-tech industry, all these industry, they continuously keep working and they still have a demand of people. But everything that has to do with transport from the airport to the airlines has had an incredible impact. And so the magic words is resilience. It's the word that you read just about everywhere. You see two words, it's COVID-19 and you see resilience. And there is somehow a bit of a relationship between them, because I think that everybody has noticed that over the last 2-3 months, some people have actually performed really well. They know how to engage, they know how to deal with these incredible challenges that nobody has ever seen before. They're connected, they're motivated, and they somehow always see the light at the end of the tunnel, okay? And then there's the other part, which don't see anything. And you don't see them either, because they're not connected, they're not convinced, they're hard to move, they don't know what to do, and that's a big challenge. They're a lot less resilient. So what we've done all the way from the beginning, let's say in the period during COVID-19, is to develop an assessment to give a better insight on, are you resilient and how resilient are you? And what is it what you actually do really well? And what is it what you do a little less well? What is it what you need to improve? Because whether we like it or not, this is also a momentum where you need to decide, almost like the reality show of Big Brother. Who do you want to take into the finals? And we know that not everybody can go into the finals. This is a hard business. Not everybody will make it until the end of the year. We have to admit it. So the question is, who do you want to bring into the finals? And if I look at my own company, we employ roughly about 100 people spread out over 18 countries. I would have put money on certain people 3 months ago that hopelessly failed. But I also have to say that I have to reconsider some people that have just really done marvelously well. So what we've done, and with that I conclude, is we have started to implement an assessment, a digital resilience assessment in the airline industry to understand how am I doing, how is my team doing, and how do we actually compare to some of the other players in the market. So airlines amongst airlines, airports amongst airports, suppliers amongst suppliers. And the results are interesting, and it gives you a bit of a guideline how to move, to the next phase of COVID-19.
Thank you, Jaap. And we get to the next phase. Let me just, because now we are getting into we have done the history of aviation. It was all going so well. We have done the day after. Let's look a bit at the sentiment, the current situation. Alan, can you tell us a bit more about how it's going to look like this summer? Things are recovering. A lot of airlines have reopened, or they will reopen activities and operations in the next 15 days. What is your assessment of the short term, let's say with a wider span up to 2021 included? How do you see the traffic recovering?
So the immediate term, in terms of government has announced that commercial traffic to our safe corridors can resume as from the 1st of July. So we know the areas which are considered safe, and we have a schedule whereby we're connecting to some of these destinations. So it is a relatively slow start. I mean, basically we're talking about opening to the German market, to the Austrian market, to Czech Republic, Hungary. That's it really. So we have 6 airlines that will operate as from the 1st of July. Predominantly dominated by Air Malta and Malta Air / Ryanair, given they have aircrafts based on the ground here in Malta. I expect that by the beginning of the winter schedule, so by the 1st of October, we will see a meaningful operation of sorts. 2021 on the books still seems limited. Of course, Malta is a leisure destination, and therefore airlines would probably devote their capacity first to strong city pairs before deploying capacity to areas such as Malta. And our expectation is to reach pre-COVID levels at least by summer 23. So this is our goal. Clearly, the sentiment out there is mixed. There are airlines which are still very buoyant and wanting to explore the opportunities the crisis has left, and other airlines who have basically been depleted of their cash, their aircraft, which are finding it more difficult to resume. This would be my very short analysis of the situation. It's difficult. I feel that the market will come back.
Sure.
I'm not sure whether this will be the short term. So I don't see us reaching the 7.2 million passenger mark we had in 2019 and 2021. At this point in time, the schedules don't show it. And clearly, I think that the airlines and the airports and all the value chain in the industry have a joint target, and that is to resume consumer confidence. I think this is something that we should not forget. I think this is fundamental. If we don't work on resuming the safety element to all passengers, we're not going to be talking about recovering the lost.
Thank you, Alan. No, absolutely clear. And actually, Aero, yes, a quick summary along the lines of what Alan just discussed. So what is the situation in your airport? But also, if you can introduce the answer of a very difficult question, which I'm going to ask you and Javier just straight away. I mean, how confusing has been for you guys to interpret what was happening? I mean, you have a government source, you have the local civil aviation, you have the ICAO. I mean, it's been a nightmare, isn't it? Middle seat empty or not? Which country you can have to fly in or out? I mean, could have been worse than that. Aero.
Yeah, I'm actually picking up where the Alan left off, very much the consumer side. And basically, it's been a nightmare at the moment to understand actually what our own government is deciding, because I'm navigating between 4 different ministries to understand what we are closing and what we are open. So it is crazy. I think at the moment Schengen area is still not working like it should be, and European Union free movement of people is not working. And I think European Union hasn't managed it very well. So on a level they should be. So that's one of the problems. It starts to come back actually when the Europe says that let's cut two countries, maybe Sweden and UK are a bit more difficult at the moment, maybe Sweden especially. But if everything is not safe, then nothing is not safe. Because for the people, it's impossible to navigate between country rules, airline rules, airport rules, hotel rules. They just not buying until it's not clear. So I very much hope that from the beginning of July, actually, it stabilizes from the demand point of view, and then we can step by step come back to the business. Thanks.
Thank you, Eero. Javier, how did you see this? I would say governmental relations. I mean, EasyJet is part of important organizations like IFO, International Airlines for Fly for Europe. So you have a continuous ongoing discussion with the European Union. You have governmental lobby. You are very well structured in terms of communication and relations. Still, I think it's been hard for you and for all other airlines to understand what would have gone to happen in the next week, month, quarter, etc., etc. Can you expand a bit on that? Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is nothing close to a joint effort, at least within Europe, no? And then they have all the different layers of government at the different countries just taking different decisions. Very confusing for operators, but also very confusing for citizens and consumers that sometimes they even didn't know what they were expected to do or not able to do. So that didn't help, that's for sure. In our case, it is true that because we completely grounded our fleet, no, since 30th of March, as mentioned before, and then until the 15th of June, we are not resuming. It's true that it didn't impact us that much, but in our view, what it was really not helping is all the different conflicted messages being given by some governments, no? Because, I mean, take the UK quarantine, 14 days quarantine when people return to, even if they would be saying that, no, don't worry, this will be over in a couple of weeks' time, well, the people does not know if that's going to be the case or not. So when making the plans for July and August, they are just, oh, what would happen? I better stay in the UK, for example. Well, here in Spain, we also got a 14-day quarantine. And even though the government say, no, but don't worry, from the 1st of July, Spain will be over. Well, but it's not the case. So still, I think expectations are really important. And then statements from the different governments are really just, driving some of those expectations. So it didn't help. So we've been asking since the beginning for a consolidated global view. Aviation is global, it's international by nature. As a minimum, we should have a European approach, if not a global through ICAO. I think, let's say, to move into the good news, at least since a couple of weeks, we've got the EASA and the European Center for Prevention, Disease Prevention and Control, the ECDC guidelines. And that's really good because that's already giving a comprehensive review with a proportional approach and just making sure that every single thing is being taken care of. And the important thing for me on that is that it's not only the aeronautical authority, it's also the health authority at European level. Now, ICAO has also last week just published some additional recommendations and guidelines. Yeah, really, really good. So I guess what we need to do is really, not reinvent the wheel, in every single country or even in every single region within the country, but just try to follow because what I'm telling and I'm also chairing the Association of Airlines in Spain, where we've got close to 80 airlines for all different nationalities, including Spanish, of course, and business models. And then I'm just telling them, look, believe me or not, but the French government or the German government or the British government are as concerned, about the health of their citizens as you are. So I think let's do something, consolidated. And then lastly, and then it was mentioned also before, regarding this concept of public health corridors, which also is important, which it is true. The pandemic is not going at the same rhythm in the different countries, but also within the country. So then we believe that instead of trying to wait until, for example, all Spain is COVID-free and all the UK is COVID-free, if it's just an example, the island of Mallorca on the one hand and then Scotland on the other are COVID-free, why not starting all those traffics on the same way without having to wait until the full UK and the full Spain is COVID-free? So I guess now we are starting to see that the recovery, is about to be starting, and then it's going to be critical that we all follow all those guidelines and make sure that people realizes that traveling by air, it's still and will be the safest way to travel.
Thank you, Javier. I'd like to condensate all this intervention, and because there's no better way to, I would say, summarize words than figures and numbers. And Andrea, if you would like to share your slides on what is the crude reality of COVID today and the impact in condensated in figures and numbers in Europe and with a wider perspective, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Enzo. Yeah, I will try to share my slide, and I hope that you can see right now. Yes. So what we told about the COVID-19 impact is quite strong. But first of all, let me tell that the impact is not exactly the same all around the world. So, of course, here we have many European players. Inside Europe, we saw that there will be different impact of COVID-19. We know that Greece, Spain, and Italy will be particularly affected by that. But if we check at the real world and the global world, and if we compare the GDP, the global domestic product in 2021 versus the global domestic product in 2018, so the year before, it's very interesting that the world is completely different. We are speaking about the European area or the Euro area, where we will have a GDP that is 2 points lower than in 2018. In Japan, we are similar situation, but in US we have already a small increase, 0.8. But if we go to Asia, and especially ASEAN 5, the country like Thailand, like Philippines or Indonesia, and Vietnam, so we have 12 points more in 2021 versus 2018, and in China will be 17 points more than in 2018. So first of all, the impact of the COVID-19 is not equal between the different geographical zones. So it's very important element to take in consideration. Also in Europe, it's something like that. Spain, Greece, and Italy will be more affected. The second element that is I hope that you can see my slide. That is very interesting. That the restart of the traffic, it's quite low. It was very well told by Malta Airport. Probably in 2023 we will see the same level. If we check also in China, that they have solved the problem in terms that they don't have, in theory, what we know, they don't have any new cases of COVID-19. The traffic is still 40% lower right now than before the crisis. So before, in reality, before the crisis. So this is very interesting element that we have to take in consideration, because the restart is very slow. We have a slow recovery. It's was told very well by all the stakeholders here. And we know that in North America, Asia, and Europe, especially Europe, we have a very low level of traffic. We hope from the half of June, as we know that we restart some airlines like EasyJet, we will have a new player entering in the market in the next week. So we hope that we will go in this direction. And this is a little bit the graph that could raise some question mark. This is a little bit provocative, because I know that the market capitalization is something that is, that is also linked to the moment. And I took the market capitalization the 5th of May. I went on the stock market and I check. Okay, let's check. What is the market capitalization of different airlines, and what is the market capitalization of one of the main technology that we are learning to use in the last 3 months? So it's Zoom technology. And we saw that the market capitalization of Zoom was the same, was exactly or very similar to the market capitalization of many airlines together. Here it was the capitalization of IAG, Lufthansa, Air France-KLM, EasyJet, Delta, American Airlines, United all together had the same capitalization of Zoom. So of course it was a picture at that moment, and of course it's just a provocative picture, but it is very interesting to understand that the risk for the sector are very high. The recovery for the sector is not easy, and it will be very long. So the market capitalization helped to tell something about that. So I left my last part about the economic measure to a second part. So I will not continue on sharing on that, and I think with Enzo we will speak later about economic measure and so on that was taken by different governments.
Absolutely, thank you, Andrea. And something else quite interesting. Back to the organization, Jaap. What do you really see happening? What are the organizations doing to get out of this impasse? And what could be the measures to be taken on board?
Well, you used the word sentiment before, which I think is key. So, when you ground a plane for a number of months, everybody understands that you have to do a very specific maintenance before you can safely use the plane. But what about if you ground people for a couple of months? You can just jumpstart them and they go back to work. Well, it's not going to happen. So what is really happening is that we need to understand what are we going to do with people. So it's very important to run what we would call an internal sentiment analysis. Understand, how people feel by coming back. How will they come back? A lot of people were very negative towards smart working, but now that they have been forced to do smart working, a lot of the people say, you know what, not that bad. And many of them will say, you know what, I want to do smart working, 2-3 days a week. So you got to run an internal sentiment analysis to make sure that you know what you people actually really want and what kind of support you are going to need and how you're going to change your organization as well. Then what is also very important is and this is what clients ask us, they really want to have also this external sentiment analysis. So I'm reviewing my own strategy, but what are my competitors doing? What is it, what they are doing? Do they have a secret recipe that I'm not aware of? We tend to go left, but what about my competition? Which direction do you want to go to? So it's very, very useful to also do a very thorough external sentiment analysis. And this is what we do for our clients, speak with the competition and understand what they do. And last but not least, we have to completely re-engage our own people. I mean, we cannot think that, we switch them off and we switch them back on, it's just going to be perfect. No, we need to understand that, how we're going to engage the people again. Are they still aware of what our new strategy is? Because, the management at the C-level, they've been working very hard to deploy a new strategy. But are we sure that we can connect all our people, to support that same strategy? So it's very, very, very important in this period, which we would call, on our way out of COVID-19, that we listen very carefully to the people. We put effort in that. We listen very carefully to the competition and we put effort in it, okay? And we make sure that the people on their way back are aligned with maybe a total new strategy.
Thank you, Jaap. New strategy. New strategy is probably the key now, because a lot of what appeared as a winning strategies before at airports and airlines level are probably old or outdated. I have made some thoughts. Javier, you are seeing that the airports are investing a lot of money in health, and so it should be protecting the safety of passengers, ensuring that the flows of the passengers are changed. So I have two questions from you, and then I will revert to my friends from the airports. One, should those costs, the investment costs, go back into the recovery, into the airline tariffs? That's an easy question. And the second one, what is the impact for the operations, in particularly the low-cost operators used to quick and fast turnarounds, when now we are not going to see any more pre-boarding areas. Very likely we're going to see maximization of social distance at airports. So some thoughts on that, Javier. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is timely because today the Spanish press is flooded with a press release we had yesterday done by the association, just complaining, because the Spanish government just put through a royal decree allowing AENA to recover those additional health and safety measures through airport charges in the future. So our view, as EasyJet and as an industry, is that this is a health crisis, and as such, some health measures to be taken, and then it should not be borne by airlines or ultimately by our passengers, but it should be just covered by the different governments. The same thing that, for example, immigration controls and the police forces that are immigration controls are being covered by the government in most countries and not by airport charges. So I think that we all have to do a number of things to really mitigate in our area of responsibility the risk, so that the overall risk is really minimum on terms of onboard contagions, but then those measures should be borne differently. If you look at the wider picture, at the public support that the industry has had, other than in few countries, and we'll speak about that later, I'm sure, where there is really a bailout, and then some countries just increasing or entering into the equity of some airlines. But in most of the other countries, we're talking about short-term credit lines. So pretty much it's just some short-term liquidity, but then it's a mid to long-term debt that will need to be paid for. So I guess if there is something else that governments of the European Union should be doing, is precisely those kind of things. If there are additional measures to be taken, then it should be the governments of each country compensating to the airport operators for that, because we fully understand, of course, that airport operators are really suffering, as much as we do, because they're having no aeronautical revenue, no commercial revenue. So that's really clear. But that's why our view is not that they need to bear those costs either, but that government should just come and then compensate for those costs, because at the end of the day, there are measures that are being taken, like you're having police in the streets now and other things that are being made for the public good. Even more in countries that depend so much on air transport, like in my case Spain, where more than 80% of the international tourism comes by air. So that's really, really critical. But
Sure.
Nevertheless, I think for the time being, the issue is not as much who's going to pay for that, but to make sure that all those measures are implemented and that we let consumers know that they are there, and then that they will be able to fly, as I mentioned before, as safely as they used to do it before.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Javier, for that view. Could you expand a bit more on the issue of the AIDS? Let's start talking about that with everybody now. We have seen money raining on airlines and, to a certain extent, on airports from the various governments. Indeed, the aviation plays a fundamental role in any government. It guarantees the mobility of the citizens. It can help supporting your own citizen in certain crisis situations, and we have seen that also with COVID. Have we seen this money being spread equally, to the best of our knowledge, towards the air operators? And that's a question I'm asking now to you, Javier, and then to Andrea from his regulatory expertise. Then I will stop with Alan and Nero to discuss public funds to the airports. But Javier, your input on state aids for airlines.
Yeah, that's a really a very important and current topic, and I guess, no, the answer is no, it's not being spread equally. I think the ideal solution would have been probably have a joint scheme for all Europe, so then each airline, independently on the nation, would be able to really just qualify. But nevertheless, as I mentioned before, there is also difference in the schemes, and most schemes, for example, the one that we went to in the UK, they call CCCF, that's a short-term liquidity measure for commercial paper that we got 600 million pounds, but again, we will need to be giving it back by in a few months' time, in a few years' time, and then the same others that also benefited from there. But it's also worth mentioning that specific scheme, in the one in the UK, it was not available to anyone. It was available only to companies in different industries, not only airlines, that before COVID launch, they were having already a healthy financial statement. So they were having investment grade credit rating. So, for example, Ryanair had access to that one, and also BA. But, for example, Virgin Atlantic were not able to get that. And Flybe, even just before that fund was available, went bust. So I think it is important to really just make sure that all those schemes are not really just changing the competitive landscape. And then for the time being, there are not going to be a lot of differences, because more or less, and I mean, other than a couple of examples as Flybe, all airlines now have managed to get the short-term liquidity for surviving. But the big question mark is going to be in a year or a bit more from now, when all those debts will have to be devolved to the lenders. Then that's going to be really a different picture, where differences will arise between airlines that have just had access to liquidity and need to pay it back, to other airlines that have had governments entering into their stakeholder. And so that's why we will see in a year or so from now how this is going to change the competitive landscape.
Yeah, interestingly, I was trying to invent or to think or imagine the most incredible situation we might face with this situation, and thinking a very funny scenario where the German government, with 20% stakeholding in Lufthansa, would actually support in a board meeting the purchase of non-German airlines from Lufthansa in the future. Just a little provoking thought, but yes, the risk of distorting the competition really is there. Alan, did the Maltese government help you in a way, shape or form to resurrect from these COVID ashes?
I have to say yes. I mean, as highlighted earlier, obviously our human capital was the biggest line item in our P&L. Therefore, as management, we were immediately addressing this. I think we addressed it in two ways. On the one hand, our message was we're in this together. In fact, the board, including myself, took a pay cut of 30%, voluntary pay cut. Management offered 25%, and we asked for staff to reduce their salaries by 20%. And I have to say the support was overwhelming. On the other hand, government did support us with a wage supplement of 800 euros per full-time employee, which meant that we managed to safeguard our staff costs significantly. So in that respect, government has done a lot. I think the last charts that I've seen, Malta was probably one of the best wage supplements that has been proposed across Europe. So we were very much assisted. When it comes to the infrastructural changes, we have so far, even though we haven't updated our airport charges since 2006, we've so far taken all the cost ourselves. We have no intention of upgrading our airport charges due to this. This is a time for us to remain competitive and to make sure that people opt for Malta in their next holidays and not argue on an airport charges increase. But obviously, given this charge has not been updated since 2006, we will be engaging with government, but this would have to be post-recovery. We have no intention of engaging at this point.
Thank you, Alan. Eero, how's the situation at Tallinn and in general in the Baltic countries? How have the governments reacted to the crisis of the airports besides the airlines?
It's very interesting that the Malta and Estonia are quite far away from each other, but actually the measures are very much the same. So first pay cut, then we made 20% staff cuts, and at the moment we all are, including me, in a wage supporting scheme from the government, which has been very good for our airport. We haven't stopped entirely the investments, so we go on with the program around 60% of investments, which still are 30 million euros this year. And no, we will not include them additionally in the airport fees. We are a small airport in the edge of Europe. We can't raise our fees, otherwise airlines, including EasyJet, will just not fly to us. So this is the reality. And also in Estonia, the tourism is 7% of GDP. It's not 15, but still it's 7. So we have to keep it in mind. I have to say that our friends in South in Latvia have been very much more supportive to the aviation and also the airport. Both the Air Baltic and also Riga Airport have received subsidies from the government. But we are happy what we have and will survive.
Okay, thank you, Eero. Which brings me to share a question and probably share also a bit of an answer with my fellow countryman, Andrea. Javier made a clear point before, and he said, yep, European Union in general, UK in different terms have tried to put in place helping schemes for companies that were in healthy financial situation before the COVID. That wasn't Alitalia, but they brought home 3 billion euros, isn't it, Andrea? Can you please tell us about this? But obviously in the European context, we don't want to kill our own flag carrier. Thank you.
Of course. We don't speak about a specific case, even if I speak a lot about that and I write a lot about that. So I go to the last part of the presentation to help myself and to help also our audience to understand a little bit better. So this economic measure that was taken all around Europe, it's very interesting because, of course, in Europe we have a direct financial contribution, especially for airlines. We know very well. We have, in some cases, some decrease of some taxes, but it's very few cases. And in general, as was told very well by EasyJet, we have also guarantee loans. So normally it was direct financial contribution and guarantee loans where we have more impact. In other markets, like Asian market, we have also some decrease of traffic fee, for example, could help also to restart the traffic and something like that, and other measure that was taken. But what I want to underline that was told very well by EasyJet is that there was not coordination between at the European level about the intervention by different member states. So the risk is that after this crisis, we will not have the most efficient, the most most efficient airlines in the market, but we will have the company that will be able or are able to take more state aid from different member states. This is very risky from my point of view because there will be a distortion of the market. So it's a risk after the crisis, the distortion of the market, as you can see here in my point. And also there was some other element that surprised me because, of course, we are not speaking about to give 3.35 billion euro to Alitalia, but also other law that, for example, in Italy we are thinking to do. So this is just a little bit a patchwork about the different measure that were intervention that the government was taking. There's some my interview to Reuters, but also some other elements in terms of support. As I told you, there's a problem that there was distortion in the market right now, but there's also some other elements that we have to take in consideration that are going to be taken, for example, in Italy. In Italy, for me, is not only the problem about this direct financial contribution to one airlines, but also, for example, there's other law in this decree that are coming from the government that also stop the possibility to, for example, to have an incentive between airlines and airports because they want to block this kind of method, this kind of scheme. They want also to put a single kind of contract, national contract for people that work in the aviation, that is the same contract of Alitalia. So there's some element that is going from my point of view, wrong direction because they are creating an anti-competitive market. So for this reason, in Italy, for example, there was a new low-fare airline association that was born that you know, and so you know very well, I know very well, as you know too. And also another question mark, for example, what we saw yesterday in Austria from the Chancellor of Austria that they want to introduce a minimum flight price. But what means minimum flight price in our sector was where we have a revenue management. One thing is the average price, another thing is the minimum flight price. That is a nonsense, especially when you want to use a revenue management. And we know very well, I don't want to be too technical, because I teach also about revenue management, but you can't think to introduce something like that just to stop the competition. And from my point of view, is a nonsense. So all these kind of things, from my point of view, is very risky. It's very risky because, of course, what we will have, of course, a problem of competition in the long term, as EasyJet told very well. But we have to pay attention that we don't have to have distortion of the market. This is the big risk from my point of view. I told to Mrs. Vestager to pay attention to that, because of course the scheme from UK was quite logical. In the European Union, they told also the help that will arrive to the company has to be similar in terms of not to distort too much the market. But we have to pay attention, because there's other law that is coming, that the excuse of COVID-19 couldn't be the excuse to destroy the airline market, the airline and the air transport market in the future.
Thank you, Andrea. It's funny how the problem is seen a different way depending on the eye of the beholder. And when I hear putting in place a law of the game or a level playing field, well, that is obviously interpreted in a very different way depending who you talk to. I would like now to start to, in a way, prepare the ground for the last part of our discussion, which is, okay, what do we do now? The future is the future. There are elements we can't control, and we don't know what we don't know. But certainly there are things we can do to improve our subjective positions as airport, as airline, as aviation operators, that we can discuss now and possibly try to see a path for the future. Let's go back to the organizations again. Again, JAP has the ability to condensate the concept in a simple and attractive word. That is the consultancy background. But homecoming, how do we go back home where we were before? How we can establish again a home for the aviation and for its people? JAP, do you want to give us 5 minutes? Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny because Andrea just said before, we're not all being treated equally. So some get help, some people do not get help. Question is, what is going to make your organization better? Is it money or is it people? Because, money at the end is a commodity. And if you don't know how to use it, then you end up like some of the companies we've just mentioned before. So it's probably about people. And if we consider money a commodity, then the question is, when we get out of this post-COVID period, let's call it homecoming, as Enzo said, what have we actually learned? What are the lessons learned? And I think that there will be companies who will come out of this more successful than other companies. And it's just because they were able to implement quicker, faster, a stronger strategy. They've taken the right choices versus not making any choices. So the organizations will need to become more and more agile, more and more resilient. It absolutely needs a redefinition of leadership skills. So the leaders that were okay only maybe 3 months ago, maybe today are not a good fit anymore. And we have to be, you have to take the courage to say, you know what, you've done your job, but post-COVID, homecoming, you're not the guy that can lead this organization anymore. We also have to understand really, really well what is, the organization model that fits ourselves best. And tomorrow will be a new tomorrow. It will be different. It will be totally different. And that means that take your people, look at your people very carefully, make sure that they're engaged, make sure that they're being coached, not being left alone. And if you are going to attract new people, which is probably going to be needed because, across industry, you may need to attract new people, then make sure that these people, fit your future needs. So rethink of how you hire people, rethink of how you train people, rethink of how you engage people, because, again, with due respect, money is helping, but it's a commodity. People are the ones that make the money to work. So put your investment into people and how you run your organization. You'll see that the competitive advantages will actually come right there.
Thank you, Jap. I think very inspiring words for us. People always come first. An organization can be injected with money, can be inflated with support, internal, external, but people are the ones that push the button. I'd like to move now to the really final part of the discussion and involve here particularly Javier, Alan, and Aero. I'm going to open my crystal ball, all right? And my crystal ball will tell you 3 or 4 points of what I see happening for airlines and for airports. You'll tell me if I'm far off it or what you're thinking. Let's start with airlines. I can see the following happening. Probably the recent lower fuel prices might help the aviation survivors to jumpstart operations. I can also see small regional airlines, less resilient and who knows, perhaps working in niche markets supported by PSO frames, disappearing or being absorbed by bigger fishes as feeding operators. I believe, and I fear anyway, that a good number of aircrafts will be returned to the lessors with a consequent AC overcapacity in the short terms. I can see networks changing a lot. I can see the networks of the future connecting mainly hubs and primary airports. They will be operated by strong, healthy legacy carriers, probably with the stronger and far-reaching alliance scheme and new code-sharing structures. Long-haul, low-cost model. I think this will be reduced to the bone in the next 2 to 3 years, possibly even suspended for a while. I believe the only strongest routes will survive. And low-cost carriers, very close to my heart, the model will survive and will be strong. I think they will still be able to intercept the demand on the point-to-point, but at terrifying, much lower fares in the immediate period, a price war. And Michael O'Leary told us a lot about that. Is he right? I think this will leave many casualties along the way, and I wouldn't be surprised to witness the survival of 4 to 5 significant actors in Europe. Ryanair, EasyJet, Wizz Air, Vueling and Volotea, maybe. Javier, some thoughts on this?
You mentioned basically everything, no? So some thoughts on which part of your speech? No. Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do know is that normally in times of crisis, and this is an unprecedented crisis, the stronger players get even more strong, no? And that's what I think it will happen here, no? It's funny because, as you know, I wrote a book about the low-cost model called Revolution in Skies. I've been forced, I'm doing the English version, but then before editing, I was just forced to just add a new chapter, no? And I'm still writing it. It's called Aviation and COVID-19. And then the subtitle is The End of the Low-Cost Model with a question mark, no? And then, well, without really the end, no? But pretty much, I do not believe that this is the end of the low-cost model. I think the low-cost model will again adapt, no, to the new circumstances. And I think if the model has something is that really show its resilience, no, and ability to really adapt. It is true, though, that, if you look at the short and medium haul, it's really, and in Europe, it's very difficult to differentiate any longer what is a low-cost carrier and what's a network carrier, because on the short and medium haul, we just all went into a hybrid model with low-cost airlines just taking some features of the network carriers and the other around. And that's why, in fact, I see a different possible trend, which would be one of more collaboration between the long-haul network carriers and low-cost carriers, because everything is saying that it's possible that the long haul is going to suffer or is going to take longer to recover. So as you know, most network carriers, their short and medium haul networks are there just for feeding their hubs to really get all this long haul traffic. So I guess it wouldn't be a surprise that some collaboration, such as the one that EasyJet started with this platform called Worldwide by EasyJet, between network carriers and a low-cost carrier, could be really just the solution for a time that long-haul traffic will not be at the levels that it was before, and then that would avoid the network carriers incurring the big losses that they normally incurring on their short-haul feeding operation. No, so I guess my view of the future is that this is not the end of the low-cost model. The low-cost model will just, or low-cost carriers will just adapt, and we might be seeing some different shapes of collaboration going forward.
Thank you, Javier. Aero, Alan, get ready for your crystal ball now. So COVID has been really the new regulator of the airport's national plans. What I'm trying to say is, whereas the various civil aviation authorities in the past years have failed to address the needs of airports and their locations in the respective countries, mainly for particular interests and political interference, well, this virus has rationalized airports in each country. In a space of 24 hours, the majority of hubs, primary and regional airports had closed. Will they reopen? Well, yes, they have reopened. But look at the regional airports. They might lose their original nature. They might become parts of integrated regional transportation systems, embedding rails, buses, and yes, some flights to main hub. There will be more scope or risk for airports to be influenced by public bodies with the national mission to revive tourism, productivity, local industry. So I can well see some wealthy infrastructure or private infrastructure management funds to try and retrench in other sectors, selling stakes or the stakes they have at those airports. Investments will have to be reduced for a while to cope with lesser traffic or not. And someone might be forced to rethink single till versus dual till regulation. Alan, what do you think about that?
I won't comment on the train bus, given that apply to us.
Yes, it doesn't.
I think that I would agree on the consolidation on the airline. So I feel that for airports our size, it's going to be difficult for us to manage our market mix. Pre-COVID, we were more or less 50% low cost, 30% legacy or flag carriers, and 20% charter carriers. So I think that the low cost segment, I feel, will come out of this much stronger than we had pre-COVID. I feel that there will be a price war in the short term, but in the medium term, I feel that prices will go up. So the price war is not is there to kickstart the industry. In the longer term, everybody wants the EBIT margins that they had pre, if not better than what they had pre. With regards to airports per se, I would say, yes, you could see larger airports taking over smaller airports, particularly in this time. But generally speaking, I wouldn't see any particular changes with regards to our airport per se. I think that the fundamental role for us is to keep improving our customer satisfaction scores. I think that together with the safety element being quite strong, we need to, as particularly us for Malta, being the first and the last impression of the Maltese Islands, we need to make sure now more than ever to make Malta proud in these times. We also need to keep pushing the sustainability part. I think we need not forget the news items that we had pre-COVID on the airline or the aviation industry getting such a flack on the sustainability part. I think that we need to take this time to improve on this. And I think that this is a time where airports and airlines and all the value chain need to come together and communicate better. I think there's no better time for the industry to communicate than when we're basically at a halt and everybody feels what it's like to be without a quick flight to Rome or Zurich or London. So I think this is a unique opportunity. We did not let that pass. This is basically my assessment, Enzo.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Eero, just to complete, please, a quick counterpoint to the crystal ball I've opened for the airports. How do you see the situation? Quickly, please.
Yes, on the airport side, we know that a lot of private money has gone into the airport during the last 20 years, and it's a long money, pension fund, so it will not de-invest quickly. So probably it will stay there and wait for the new growth. I like very much the idea that the airports become more of connectivity drivers than the business places, or just to get the vast money out. So I think it's very important that the airport's role will be connectivity, not the money making, and I like it very much. I'm doing this one. And what concerns the passenger, actually, coming back to the beginning, safety, very important, but people want to get to the old times. So I think that the aviation will be good and safe again when we don't have to follow the 2+2 rules or disinfect every corner because traveling doesn't pick up until this happens. So the governments have to fight the virus, and then the aviation can go back to normal step by step again. So it's more like this way.
Thank you, Eero. Well, I think this led us to the conclusion of our discussion. I enjoyed it really much, guys. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Jap, Alan, Eero, and basically Javier. Thank you very much. You were the only airline to be here in the game and discuss aviation and airports, and an important